Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it, and shalom, goeienacht, of genaamd, jammer, and welcome to the Big Daddy Liberty Show, the Big Daddy Liberty Show with me, Usihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. Welcome to it, welcome to it. Goodness me, are we not going to have a interesting show tonight as we unpack an issue which I can actually say at the offset worries me deeply because it has great implications for the issue of the rule of law, and it tests the mettle of our justice system. And I must say this before I bring my guest on, I'm feeling a sense of deja vu in this particular case as I think back to the mistrial that happened in Coligny in the Northwest, where those two farmers accused of murder eventually had their convictions overturned in the Supreme Court of Appeals. And lots of scathing words in that particular judgment to the conduct of the police, the witnesses in that particular case, and of course to the judge who had initially presided over that. But hey, we're not talking Coligny tonight. We're looking at a small town in Mpumalanga province called Piet Retief, of Mkhondo in Mpumalanga. So you're probably wondering, hey man, what's happening in Piet Retief? Maybe you haven't been paying attention to the news, or maybe you have been paying attention to the mainstream media and have a very warped sense of things, because I question whether the coalition between politicians and the mainstream media have been objective in their reporting on what happened and is alleged rather to have happened in that part of the world. So that I asked the question on tonight's show: what are we going to get? What will dominate the news cycle when it comes to this particular issue? Will it be the truth and the various contested truths around this case, or will it be more of the current, the same, which is the political narratives being spun out of that? So I have a very interesting guest tonight, Gabriel Crouse, a journalist at the Daily Friend publication. He'll help us unpack this because he was on the ground. But before I get into any of that, a reminder to you, hey man, if you like this show, then by goodness, please support it. You can do so by hitting the link in the description of the video, or contributing as little as 20 Rand a month to the show. It really helps us get going and helps us get around the country. A new thing I'm going to do at the beginning of every episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Just last week, I had a very interesting back and forth with I'll call him a troll on social media. And one of the interesting things he called me was a scary right-winger, And, he said, that he finds me really scary. So what I've decided to do at the beginning of every Big Daddy Liberty Show will be the right-winger raw. That's right, you heard me, the right-winger raw. The extreme right-winger is what he called me, raw. So here we go. Are you guys ready? Okay, here we go. Here comes the right-winger raw. I must warn you, it's very scary. Okay, here we go. Raw. I'm sorry. Yo, the things my detractors will say, man. Woo, okay, I'm sorry. All right, I'm back, everybody, I'm back. With that bit of silliness out of the way, let me get straight into my interview with my guest. Let me actually bring him on screen. That'll take a bit of a moment here. There he is. All right.
I'm terrified.
Gabriel Crouse from the Daily Friend publication. He's a journalist over there. Gabriel, good evening.
How's it, Sihle? It's. I think we're seeing a meme in the making. That little GIF of you roaring.
Hey man,
I
It's
hope to
very
see
scary,
that
wasn't it?
appear under every claim that you're an extremely dangerous and terrifying person.
Raw.
Yeah.
Amen.
Ideas, dude. Ideas are scary.
Dog.
To
I'll tell you
those
this.
who fear the truth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you're spot on. And funny enough, that word you've just pushed out, truth, is one which will perhaps define what we discuss here on the show. Because as I sort of put in the title, and people who are joining are seeing, is, there are contested truths in what is happening in Mkhondo or Piet Retief at the moment. But before I get into any of that, why are we even talking about Piet Retief, Gabriel? What's going on in that part of the world?
So yeah, I mean, I was asked. I saw in one of the comments from a critic, I suppose, under my article today. Why are you even covering this? Why aren't you covering something else?
Oh.
Well, part of the reason is that the premier of Mpumalanga, the mayor of Mkhondo / Piet Retief, and by the way, everyone there calls it Piet Retief, traditional leaders, taxi drivers, farmers. No one really knows what Mkhondo means. So I'm going to call it Piet Retief. But serious politicians have descended upon the scene, a member of parliament from the EFF, and have said this is a national crisis. The police have said that if you release the accused on bail, then this will produce a national crisis. Outside of the court on both days, Monday and Tuesday, there were thousands of protesters, many of them bussed in and brought in taxis, who threw rocks and beer bottles at the police, who in turn had stun grenades thrown at them. There were one or two incidents where police fired rubber bullets, although from the conversation I had with the police, no one was injured. And I saw one of those incidents, you sort of fired at a warning shot. So I'm covering this because this is a national story, and I'm covering it because there's a great threat in play here. What is the actual incident? On 9 April, the Coka brothers died. Two brothers, Zenzele and Amos, although Nkika is the other name of the second deceased, and they were on a farm called Pampoenkraal. They actually live sort of in a homestead next to this farm, and on one version, which the state presented. So this was already in the media, but now we've had the distilled version as presented by the state yesterday in court. On this version, 7 unarmed, innocent, poor, unemployed people went to the farm to look for work. And the racist farmers and their racist black farm workers wanted to chase them away. But they didn't go away. They said, no, please, we just want some work. And so they took one of them, Mr. Tlashwayo. They beat him up and they tied him to a tree and they handcuffed him and they left him to bleed under the tree. And so then the others who ran away then phoned their family and friends and said, please, can you come and help us? And so then more people arrived on the scene. In the meantime, the farmers and the indunas and the farm workers called their helpers, and 50 people arrived, heavily armed. And then there was a fight where the unemployed ones said, please, can you release this man that you're holding hostage? And they said no. So one of the brothers tried to open the gate, and then he was shot dead, and as was his other brother. And it's not just the shots; it's also others were assaulted. So the charges are murder, two counts of murder, also kidnapping for Mr. Tlashwayo, and also assault. And there are then other lesser charges, but those are the headline charges. Those are the only ones that have been brought, but the state says it will bring other charges. So that's one version. Mm-hmm. And this is a version that I've seen every day on ENCA and Newsroom Africa and SABC, and that I've read all throughout the press. My favorite corroboration of this version came in the Daily Maverick, where a writer said, look, I grew up in Piet Retief and experienced racism in the 80s. So I know that it was the case that these racist white people killed these black people. You can go and look that article up if you think that I'm mischaracterizing it.
That's crazy, man. Mainstream media, proper grift. But anyway, yeah.
Okay,
but there is this other version of
but that is a very serious version. That is a very serious version, and it must be investigated.
Yeah.
I'm not ruling out the possibility that it's true. Here's the other version. The other version, which is coming from the 5 accused. I can't remember all their names. But they're farmers, and one of them.
Can you just give me a moment? So the 5 accused were farmers Daniel Malan, Cornelius Greiling, Othard Klingenberg, Ignatius Steinberg, and a farm manager, Mr. Zenzele Mgcini.
Yes. And so Zenzele Mgcini has been accused of being, they say he's got human teeth in his house, and that he's, maybe some kind of witch doctor, and that he sort of has made this pact with the white devil, and so okay. But what is his version and the other 4 accused versions? Their version is
witchcraft dentistry. Well, there you have it. I'm sorry, I had to make that comment. Yes, do continue.
Okay, so their version is also a very serious version, and their version is that they were going about business on the 9th of April, and then some people came and were harassing the farm workers and saying, "Here's the problem. You guys have hired people who are not from this area, and this is very wrong for you to do. And so you must actually hire us, and you must fire those people." Foreign, but not foreigners like from out of the country, just foreigners from like the next town. Okay. And then they said, "We want to speak to the farm manager." And then when he came, Mr. Potgieter, he was struck on the head with a knobkiri. And that's why the farm workers, and he was sent to hospital with very serious injuries. And so the farm workers detained the attacker. Hlatshwayo. And so they used I can't remember, that plastic thing to tie his hands and put him by the tree. Exactly. And they put him by the tree, and they called the police. And this is at 11 o'clock in the morning. But the police didn't come. It is common cause. The police confirmed that they were called and that they didn't come. Then the others ran away and came back with reinforcements. In the meanwhile, the farm workers and Mr. Potgieter, they saw he's now injured, but another one saw that the situation could get worse. So they called their WhatsApp group or their walkie-talkie group for support. And so people came. Then the 2 crowds, as it were, met across the road by the gate, on the other side of which was Mr. Hlatshwayo. And there was some angry conversation. Allegations being made from the farmer's side that Mr. Potgieter had been assaulted. And then one of the Coka brothers struck Hans Mulman, another farmer, a blow to the head with a steel pipe, knocking him unconscious. Hans Mulman is still in hospital. I'm not sure that he's regained consciousness. I've tried to establish his exact status, but it has been described to me most recently by the police as he's in critical condition. And that they're not able to speak to him yet. So he had a firearm, and upon being struck down, the Coka brother was then able to take that firearm and start shooting. But he didn't shoot very accurately. He was in a panic and was trying to retreat and get behind his bakkie so that, if he's being shot back at, he won't be shot. So he's shooting and running back. And in the course of that, he shoots his own brother, the other Coka brother, dead. In the course of continuing to shoot at the farmers and the farm workers and whoever else had come to support, he was then shot. And what I've been told is the version, although I haven't gone through this part of the affidavit, is that he was shot by Othard Klinger in self-defense. So so you've got 2 versions, the one in which one Coka brother accidentally kills his own brother and is himself killed in self-defense. And you've got another version where innocent and unarmed people are viciously murdered while just trying to look for a job. And it's my duty to keep an open mind. I also find it an easy thing to keep an open mind on this because the facts are not all in. The ballistic evidence is not all in. Was there gunpowder on the hand of one Coka brother? We don't yet know that. We don't know all the facts. We look forward to seeing more facts and seeing more testimony and seeing more cross-examination. I want to say something about the court proceedings yesterday. So on the first day, you basically just get the version. Okay. So yesterday, the chief investigating officer, warrant officer Vukile, David Vukile, I think is his name. He is called by the state to make the case. Not just that this is murder, kidnapping, and assault, but also that there's a conspiracy here, which means it's a Schedule 6 offense, which means you basically can't get bail unless there's a very extraordinary circumstance justified. Because this law is designed to stop gangsters, gang violence, guys who are in a conspiracy from getting out. His testimony relied almost entirely upon 4 witnesses whose statements had been taken in. And listening to that in the crowd, I was there in the gallery with EFF and ANC leaders, with members of the community, with family of the Coka brothers, with interested parties, and I could feel, them expressing vocally their shock and their horror and their sadness and their anger at the events as he was describing it. It was moving and it was difficult to hear. When the state was leading the questioning, when the prosecution was leading the questioning, then there was some kind of disruption and I'd been watching this happen for an hour. The warrant officer was receiving prompts from the other side of the court from a man who was writing things down on pieces of paper on a board and then showing it up for him to see what to say.
That's crazy.
Now, the judge couldn't see it. The magistrate, I beg your pardon, couldn't see it because this person was behind a podium. But I could see it. Anyone in the gallery could see it. The defense couldn't really see it because they were looking the other way. But after an hour, they looked and they saw, because this guy I don't have a pen with me, but he was clicking his pen against his forehead to make a noise to get the warrant officer to look back at him. And I could understand that the prosecution was frustrated because although this is their witness, he wasn't telling his story. He wasn't answering questions. He was repeatedly meandering around and telling the court what he's going to do and what he believes is going to surface. And then they were trying to rein him back in. And then you see the signs. And then the defense says, Your Worship, can you see what's happening? And then suddenly everyone started speaking Latin at each other. The lawyers were shouting at each other. And then the magistrate called an adjournment. Now, I've spoken to a practicing legal expert who said on that basis, you could throw the witness's testimony out of court because that is tampering with witness testimony in the box, which you can't do. Yeah. You can hand documents to the witness that are available to everyone, and that's transparently done. But you can't have cue cards prompting him on what to say. Anyway, that was just a small digression, which kind of undermined, even while the story was being told, that version of the story, maybe not in a substantial way. Maybe it's just a procedural thing. Of course, procedure does matter. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge came from the defense, and they said it took 2 hours to get here. But basically, they said, these witnesses, can they explain in any way how Hans Moelman and Mr. Potgieter and the other farmer were injured?
Yeah.
And he said, no, they have made no such explanation. I gave no such explanation in my summary of the witness's testimony because they gave no such explanation. Now, it's common cause on the evidence thus far, on all of the witnesses' testimony thus far, both the accused and the accusing witnesses, that after the shots were fired, there was no more violence. Things cooled down and they waited for the police to come, who came then 20 minutes later. So those injuries couldn't have happened after. They also it couldn't be the case, everyone agreed, that Hans Moelman knocked himself out to the head. That is not a reasonable assumption. It also is not a reasonable assumption that one of the other farmers knocked him out. So there are two groups. The injuries seem like they must come from that opposing group. Yeah. And it's from that group that there are the witnesses. So it is strange, argued the defense, that they have no explanation of how those injuries could have come about And if those injuries came about before the shots were fired, then that would be prima facie evidence that the shots were fired in self-defense. When you have 2 people hospitalized and another one badly injured before shots are fired, then the state's position that this is a vicious and cold-blooded murder becomes a very weak position.
Yeah.
The warrant officer didn't really have much to say on that point.
But to this particular point, let me just put a bookmark in this for a moment. If you're just joining us, welcome to it. We're in the last 10 minutes of the BBL show. I'm in conversation with Gabriel Crouse, a journalist at the Daily Friend, someone who was on the ground in Piet Retief, keeping tabs on what was happening inside and outside of court. We've just gone through the last maybe 10 minutes or so of some of the, happenings inside the court, and of course the 2 versions, the contested truths that I speak of in the descriptor of this video. But there was also quite a lot of action, if I can call it that, outside of court, which had an impact on what happened on the inside. Gabriel, your first piece on the Daily Friend, and I encourage you, dear viewer, to go to www.dailyfriend.co.za, a piece by Gabriel called "Fear and Loathing in Mkhondo: Man Stabbed for Others." I may have written butchered that. Man stabbed for others, including this journalist attacked. You've got to read it, Gabriel. What happened outside the court? Talk to me about the explosive climate that seemingly, if I read your piece correctly, is being driven by 2 political parties. These seemingly are not necessarily the local residents, although there could be local residents, but there's definitely a tinge of the party political leaders driving a lot of the activism and protesting we see outside.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, on Monday morning before the proceedings began, I didn't need any coffee because I was wide awake, seeing the court surrounded by barbed wire and police, and then beyond that, an ANC crowd. And I say ANC crowd because of the speakers and because of the paraphernalia being worn. And they were chanting "Panzi Amabunu Panzi," saying terrible things about Mlungus, saying 1962 people must go. And then further down, 1652. Sorry, I'm getting my dates. I'm forgetting. And then Nyamas, and then further down the road there was an EFF crowd.
Yeah,
I thought those 2 crowds are going to vie against one another, but they joined very quickly together under the slogan "Panzi Amabunu Panzi," down with the farmer.
Of course they did.
And then from the other side, suddenly there was a bit of an attack from the protesters, pulling the barbed wire away, throwing rocks at the police. The police then formed a cordon, went forward and dealt with it. It seemed like everything was being kept under control. In fact, the whole day, things were relatively under control until the court proceeding had concluded, and it was clear that they weren't going to be released on bail that day. Remember, the Coligny connection that you started with is that the thought of releasing the accused on bail was part of what triggered quite wanton destruction in Coligny.
Yeah.
So, and people that I spoke to on the ground, that was their big fear. If you release these guys, are they going to burn down my business? How am I going to work at this petrol station if it doesn't? If it's been blown up? So,
in fact, some businesses were closed. You mentioned in the piece.
Almost every business in Piet Retief was closed. You couldn't find almost anything open. So after the day was after 2 o'clock, the protesters started to melt away. It had been a hot day. The court proceeding was over. The police also stood down. Many melted away. And oddly enough, that is when it became the most dangerous.
Sure.
And I was looking for a police liaison because that's the only person journalists can talk to about a technical question. In fact, the question was, had the police been instructed by the court to turn down the volume? Because I heard the court give such an instruction, but the volume wasn't turned down of the crowd outside. They still had speakers the whole way through, blaring music and speeches into the court. So you can't, the recording in the court maybe can be compromised. Anyway, after an hour, the police told me to go find this liaison at the Total garage, 4 blocks down from the court. I went there.
So a police officer told you to go there?
Yes, two police officers. I went there and I found no police there, but I did see some very angry looking youth, I don't know, people our age, and one of them stared me down and tried to get in the way of my car and said, "Mlungu, F off," and I then tried to get around him. I thought about parking my car and getting out to look for the police officer, but then when I saw more were coming, I thought I should rather just leave. So I tried to turn around the car. He chased after me, kicked my tire. Then another guy came running from the front and threw sort of a brick almost through my windscreen. It shattered the windscreen, but it didn't go all the way through. Another thud came on the roof. I assume it was another rock. And I sped away. Looking in the rearview mirror, I heard shouting and people running after me, but they were on foot and I was in a car, so I could quickly get away. I then went to the cops to go and report back outside of the court and what had just happened and tell them, "You just sent me here." They weren't very impressed. By the time I got to the police station, another 2 people were there. Another 3 people were there in 2 cars that had been similarly attacked. Half an hour later, another person came who had been attacked even more viciously. She was in tears and was quite explicit about the fact that she felt that if she didn't have super high strength windows, many rocks had been thrown, one would have gotten through and she would have been killed, that was the intent. A man was stabbed in that total garage. I've been trying to get more details about that, but the police won't release it, other than to say he's in hospital and in critical condition. I also have had a report from a business person whose colleague had rocks thrown through their window around there, and they managed to throw enough big rocks that they actually broke the window and then threw another one, which then struck his head and knocked him badly. He wasn't so badly knocked that he could continue to drive away, but then he suffered, he had to go to hospital for what might be brain damage. So they really meant business. And
again, Gabriel, I must pause you here because we're really running out of time.
Let me just say, businesses were also attacked and one farm was partly burnt down that night.
But there was a common denominator in all of this, if I read your piece correctly, is that this was a crowd who were specifically targeting white people, white residents of their town, anybody who happened to be passing who was particularly white. Talk to me about where the genesis of this is. Is this what perhaps is being goaded on by the politicians in that area? Are we seeing them try to do perhaps what they failed to do in Senegal, which is to drive that race narrative of it is us versus them?
So the short answer is yes. I'd like to put one qualifier, which is all of the people in cars that were attacked, that I have ascertained were white and were targeted on that basis. It was explicitly said when I was being attacked, But that is not to say that everyone who is being threatened or attacked is white. I don't know the race of the man who was stabbed. When you are on foot, there are other issues that come into play, which is, what are your politics? Are you criticizing someone are you arguing the other side of the version? Or are you saying, look, you shouldn't be drunk and throwing beer bottles? Or are you saying, hey, this is my business, please don't undermine it? Or are you saying, you've come from outside, this is not really your town, please behave? There are many bases. And as I said, speaking to some residents and even to some cops, there is, I mean, the warrant officer who was leading evidence for the state was very explicit in his anathema towards Indunas. And I can understand why, in the sense that I have spoken to traditional leaders in the area, one of whom was actually at the Coka brothers' funerals, who was arguing for peace and saying, we must let the law follow its course. You must bring evidence. You mustn't prejudge. These Indunas have also suffered some forms of intimidation, reprisal, and so I just want to say the political narrative that you speak to is the thing driving this violence, but that narrative is not just target white people. It is target anyone who is willing to work with a white person. Literally, one of the Indunas who spoke at the funeral summarized the other speeches for me, because my Zulu is not great. He said, if I can put 3 of the speeches in a sentence, they said to black farm workers there, if you work for a white man, you are impimpi. And I saw him say there's 2 black farm workers
what that means.
Who maybe needs to be necklaced, doused in petrol with a tire around you and set it on fire. He said there's 2 black farm workers after the funeral, encouraging them, please don't think like this. Please, your working relationship it's a thing. And I saw it going to other farms where land reform projects have happened where people have lost their jobs, who are desperate, who showed me buildings that have become dilapidated, who showed me a creche where there's just rotting underpants and panties and bloodstains and everything has been destroyed and no one has learned there for since 2017. And they were begging, please don't let this narrative be what defines our neighborhood and our collaboration, because we can't afford that. We are too close to the hunger line. We have to work together. We can't burn things down. Yeah. But the counter narrative is being driven by people with much bigger platforms, much bigger microphones, and a lot of media sympathy. I've seen very little by way of criticism of that in the mainstream.
And that is a massive problem. Speaking about a problem, we've run out of time, Gabriel, and this is one of those topics that really does deserve a lot more time. And again, it's ongoing. This is an ongoing thing. To that effect, if you are wanting to find out even more, although Gabriel did a good job of breaking this down, unpacking the issues, go to the Daily Friend publication, www.dailyfriend.co.za. You'll find the entire article, what we're discussing, on the website, as the article and even photos of what Gabriel is talking about on that piece. Guys, I really, really encourage you to keep tabs on this issue, because it'll become, the way I see it at least, an important issue of, does the justice system withstand the political pressure outside, the political narratives trying to waft in to the trial itself, and does it actually do what we all wanted to do, black and white, which is to, stick to the truth, stick to the facts, and to, on the one hand, definitely bring justice to the Coka brothers if, they are found to have been murdered, and, you want their murderers to be found and convicted. But if that wasn't the case, if it wasn't a murder, then of course for these gentlemen to be exonerated and of course to be let off. So again, competing narratives, competing and contested truths, but we want the justice system to do its job. With that being said, Gabriel, I might join you next week, Monday, down in Piet Retief. You did mention that the next appearance in this bail hearing is on Monday, correct?
Yeah, so that's correct. Dude, I think it'd be great for you to come. Yeah.
Absolutely, and all I'll be there to do is to talk to the ordinary people on the ground as they bear witness to the spectacle of, mobs at times taking over their town. So we'll I'm not sure if I'm back. There we go.
I hear you now.
Yeah, sorry, a call came through. And maybe on that note, Gabriel, thank you very much for joining me on this stream. Homie, I might see you on Sunday, please, for Liberty and Friends. I want us to unpack this with greater detail, especially as it will be the evening before it will be the next appearance with the guys. Guys, that was Gabriel Crouse from the Daily Friend, a journalist in that part of the world. You can find his writing, of course, at www.dailyfriend.co.za. Gabriel, thanks a lot.
Sihle, thank you very much.
And thank you, dear viewer, for watching this episode of the BDL show. A heavy topic, but one which I wanted us to have a conversation about, because it's not just about Piet Retief. I mean, there have been incidents like these before, where if there is a court case in a small town, you'll find political parties and even mainstream media really capitalizing on this, and at times even grifting on these issues, often at the expense of the people who live there, and often at the expense of the actual truth. So that'll be my mission, if anything, getting down to the truth of things and talking to the ordinary residents of the area as to see what they believe is happening in that part of the world. Guys, thanks for watching. Super appreciate it. Please, please, please do support the show. It is those of you who contribute who allow me to put diesel in the bakkie to be able to get to towns like Piet Retief and the like. So please, I really encourage you to contribute to the show. All the details are in the descriptor of the video. With that being said, a major thanks to you guys for having watched. And as I always end the show, a reminder to you to never trust a commie.